Welcome, everyone, to the PAX East Fear Factor panel. I'm Allie Foreman, an entertainment reporter with Mashable, obsessed with video games and obsessed with horror. Today, I'm joined by three excellent panelists. Would you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves one at a time? Why don't we start with you, Barney?
Thanks, I'm Barney Pratt. I'm audio director of Supermassive Games, currently focused on the Dark Pictures Anthology. The last game in that series, or the next game in that series to come out, will be out on the 30th of October. It's called Little Hope, and just in time for Halloween.
My name is Lucas. I'm the lead producer of Little Nightmares. So I've been working on this franchise since we started at Bandai Namco, our relationship with Starship Studio, and I'm very happy to be there.
Okay, I'm Michel Ziegler. I'm developer at Hidden Fields in Lucerne, and I'm making Mundown, which is a folklore-inspired horror tale.
Let's just dive straight into what this panel is all about. What makes games scary? Barney, can you start us off?
So I'm biased. Being an audio director, I'm going to jump straight in and say it's the audio, of course, but I know that's not entirely true. I could bang on about that for hours. It's a number of things. It's about having a kind of emotional and sort of psychological kind of involvement with the game. For the players, it's the unexpected. It's taking believable characters to extreme situations. It can be suspense. It can be impact with jump scares. It's kind of a great number of things. It's often the timing and the subject matter and crafting those moments to kind of take the player on a journey they weren't expecting, maybe.
Lucas, what do you think?
No, I totally agree that sound design really plays a big role. In making the game very scary. I mean, the build-up and the atmosphere are extremely important. There are really different angles where you can make like the game scary. So it can be more psychological, it can be more like jump scare or more gory oriented. Little Nightmares, we tend to avoid showing too much so that people are more like thinking what's happening in the background, and we think that's actually more impactful than showing. At least for our game, that works very well. And I think it's creating universe that are unique and very unsettling for the players. That makes things very scary, to me at least.
Michel?
Yeah, I think it's very subjective, and me personally, I find it very unnerving if I enter a foreign world where I'm a new arrival and I don't know really how the world works, where I'm lost. A lot of unexpected sights and sounds. It's also beauty and the darkness, because that can not only be dark, and kind of a story and the characters that all work together to create this one package. So I think for me, a lot of it comes down to an atmosphere of dread and oppression. Yeah, that's my personal preference, I think, in this genre.
When we talk about that combination of beauty and of darkness, horror games have traditionally been known as survival horror. You've got the Resident Evils, the Silent Hills. That's kind of where people have thought of horror games going. But all of you represent very unique, different kinds of new horror. What do you make of the way that horror games are expanding? And do you consider your projects part of a new subgenre or multiple subgenres? Would you like to start, Michel?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot going on, and also in the indie scene when it comes to horror. And kind of Mundown is kind of a bit of it's not a retro-inspired game, but I would like to bring some of the unexpectedness and the freshness of those games, how they felt when they came out, I think. And I think it's more of the story, and the folklore is very important in my case. Yeah.
I think just in terms of folklore, I think it's really interesting to kind of take that and then maybe put a different twist onto it, which is where the horror comes into that kind of original story. I think a lot of the narratives from Supermassive have been based on truths, based on historical fact, and kind of exploring those and kind of bringing those to kind of a different end to surprise the player.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of different inspirations that that can make things very very unique. In Little Nightmares 2, we have like that character. She's a teacher, so she so basically everyone has experienced like having a teacher that is able to kind of hear you while she's like writing on the billboard or something. She's kind of has like eyes behind her head or something like that. So we wanted to take that situation to the extreme where like the teacher can just twist completely her neck around, and that's really scary. And that goes also with the folklore. Like that character is inspired from a traditional like Japanese yokai, the Rokurakuri, which is like a woman who can extend her neck. So in terms of gameplay and feel, she's inspired by that. So it's really combination of different things, but it's very important that the ending result feels like unique and authentic. That's what we're trying to achieve, of course. But in the case of Little Nightmares, it's always complex because it's about surviving. It's about we're using the codes of the horror genre, but at the same time it's difficult to say we're just a survival horror because we have platforming, we have puzzles. So we have got this multiple genre factor, which is very interesting. Like when you talk to people, sometimes they just say you're doing platforming. Sometimes they just say you're doing horror. It's just like we're doing kind of all of that.
In hearing all of you talk about your various games, I think we can all agree that it evokes a very specific, very cinematic image. And it's true across all of the games that we've discussed. In what ways do you think the increasing popularity of horror in film, because we're obviously in the middle of a cinematic horror renaissance, how is that being mirrored in games, or is it not? Is it motivated by something else? Barney, obviously, the Dark Pictures Anthology is hugely cinematic, hence the whole movie night mode of Man of Medan. But would you mind starting us off and giving us your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I take a lot of influences from you can't underestimate the influence of Netflix and the indie horror scene within that. There's a few great series that we've been watching recently, and I'm always finding little tips and tricks. I think the kind of believable characters has been an increasing kind of crossover from cinema into games. I think the performances as well, that is, players they're desiring lifelike or hyper-real performances in games to match those in film, in cinema. And I think for us with the Dark Pictures, to be able to present an absolutely cinematic experience with the audio, especially, we go to great lengths for the detail on those characters, the detail in the environment, the kind of seamless flow of the game, the narrative, even within the choices and even within the multiplayer experience within that. So we try and take that cinematic experience and really extend it into games. So I'd say we're heavily influenced, and I think there's such an unlimited number of subgenres that are being explored, again within the indie horror film scene. I think that's opening up opportunities and styles within the games world as well. I mean, not to underestimate the original styles that games present as well.
Yeah, definitely. There's I mean, horror has never been as accessible as it is now. It used to be a bit of a niche genre, or at least it wasn't. It was difficult to get like horror movies back in the days. Now, like Barney said, it's just like just expansion of Netflix. You've got original horror creations from France, from Germany, of course from the US, from the UK as well. That has just like opened up like a large audience for horror genres. And in case of Little Nightmares, it's difficult to say like these have influenced our games directly, because the game, I think, is influenced not only by horror, by really a lot of different kind of things. If you check the mood boards from the artist team at Tarsha, they're really amazing. It comes from everywhere. But definitely, I think it's a great time to make horror games. That's for sure. I mean, I think the audience has never been as demanding as it is now.
It's
Michelle,
really
anything to add?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
Sorry. Because when I started the game, I wasn't really thinking of a horror as a genre at all. I just had this specific vision of this folklore-inspired, very specific alpine scenario. And I started in 2014. And now when I look around, there's folklore horror popping out everywhere, like in television, in movies. And it seems like a lot of people in parallel kind of had the same idea. And now it seems to become a massive thing, which is really cool. As for cinematic influence, I mean, for Moondown, it's a first-person game, so I would say, and it doesn't have traditional cutscenes, so the cinematic influence is not that huge. While I mean, the atmosphere, the influence of atmospheres, however, is pretty obvious. But it's largely on older horror films, like Rosemary's Baby, and the like. Just for this archaic kind of old feeling mood that is going on. And Down, a lot of inspiration is actually from old photographs as well.
With all of those references, death tends to serve as kind of the ultimate consequence in any horror movie and any horror story. But obviously, death plays a really different role in terms of gameplay. How do you account for that in your own project when, Lucas, you're probably the best person to start us off here since Little Nightmares is a platformer. I spent last night being picked up by the twin chefs, which was horrifying. But can you give us a little bit of a sense of how you go about creating that sense of horror? Somebody may have to die multiple times in a game.
Yeah, so in Little Nightmares, we play with death in very different approaches. So like you said, we do have some die and retry kind of death where you will have to die multiple times to complete the section, and we actually know when we intend the player to die here. We just need to, of course, avoid creating a frustrating experience. So it's a lot of balancing, but at the same time we also have gameplay where you will explore a room, and you will see, like, a very big monster, and that you will have probably different kind of options to sneak around, and in that case death is a bit more like the traditional ultimate consequence. You will just avoid dying from this big monster. That if you get spotted, you might have a short window to escape, but it's gonna be very challenging. So yeah, we approach death with different angles, and actually that's quite fun. And we even like sometimes play like Little Nightmares when we're counting the deaths of the players and stuff like that. So it's nice stats to track.
Barney, obviously in dark pictures, you can lose characters altogether. How does that change the horror experience?
Yeah, so the strapline is all can survive. You can kill everybody. You can, or everybody can survive. I think death in horror can be a good thing. So you can want something or someone dead. So I think that's kind of an interesting twist on it. That's outside of our norm. We can, from an audio perspective, we can make deaths, any level of kind of emotional, from kind of schmaltz all the way down to, yeah, we're happy that was over. But we can even mislead the player to make some deaths seem more emotional than maybe they actually are, for a number of reasons. So no, I mean, deaths are, again, with horror, it's a very subjective thing. It's not always as negative for us in a third person, with some distance maybe from some of the characters, and with multiple characters in the narratives to play with. So yeah, we can play around with that quite a lot.
Michelle, anything to add?
Yeah, for Moondown, is trying to find the right amount of punishment that a death should entail, because it's not really the main thing about the game. It's not a game that's challenge based per se and lives more from the atmosphere and story, but at the same time you can die because from the enemy encounters in the game, because I personally like if there's some element of actual threat going on in the game. It's to raise the stakes a little bit. But again, it shouldn't be in the foreground, and also it's also an element of storytelling as well. There's some thing about one death by one creature, which is pretty it's pretty elaborate. But can't tell you
No spoilers.
yet.
We've talked a lot about horror movies, but in playing horror video games, scares are presented quite differently from movies because your players can approach things multiple times or approach them in ways you didn't expect, from angles you didn't expect if you're in an environment, or maybe their narrative in the Dark Pictures anthology has unfolded in a way that is not all that common, whatever it is. In that way, is making a horror game more like crafting a haunted house than it is a horror movie? Anyone can start. Lucas, how do you start?
Yeah, I mean, in our case, Little Nightmares is very art driven. Well, most of video games are more like design driven, which makes it, I think, closer to movies in some ways. Since we have like a rather linear adventure, this allows us to control the pace, to control the atmosphere, the encounters, and the build up. So in that respect, I think we're kind of closer to movies because we've got a lot of people just watching playthroughs of walkthroughs of Little Nightmares, not playing and really enjoying it, and that's I think that's really great. But there is still a situation where you can definitely tackle down your enemies from different angles, and yeah, sometimes we don't expect people to do what they do, and it's very fun to watch. And one thing that I really enjoy with video games is how it is enjoyable for people to share their experience. And when they play video game, like when they're screaming and all of that, when they're streaming their experience, that's really amazing. That's not something you've got with movies, so it's really fun to do that.
But similarly, we have at least sections of linear for which we can craft the experience. So we've got a lot of control over those scares, as Lucas just said. But well, funnily enough, we've just put in a 360 follow cam style camera into Little Hope, which has given us some challenges around that, about where to place the camera, etc. But since we're looking at and crafting each of the moments in the game kind of quite heavily, there's a certain amount of control we can place on that camera to improve the experience for the player, whilst giving them the expectations and freedom of that camera. So that's been a huge advance. It comes with responsibility, as you say. We need to control that. It's also about timings. It's also about kind of not just getting the camera in the right position, but about crafting those moments and really playing with the timings to kind of tap into kind of expected pause time. There's something we discovered in audio very quickly. There's a classic way of doing a scare is you have a riser and then you have a sting. So you're coming into a situation, everything's getting more exciting, and then whammo, you go with the sting, right? That's a classic jump scare moment. But if you do that the first time, that's great, and the player thinks, okay, I'm definitely playing a horror game, that's good. But then the next time, you can do the riser, and they just hold with the pause, and then go with the sting. So they didn't think it was going to come, they've given up on it, and then it comes in, that can scare them. And then the third time, because you're now playing with their expectations, you can just have a simple riser to nothing, no sting at all. So, an infinite gap, as it were. And in that way, you leave them hanging because they don't know whether that sting's going to come still. So you're just playing with their emotions. And a lot of these, like the riser to nothing, that kind of can be on the corner of exploration, can be in any kind of situation. So there's ways of crafting those moments, even within the kind of free camera situation, just to improve the experience.
Michelle, how does this play into your game?
Yeah, it's definitely more like a haunted house than a movie, since it's very non-linear, and we're trying to find a good mix of organic and dynamic encounters and more moments that are more focused and even linear in some situations, because if you don't do that, there's a chance you will never have an encounter with an enemy. So it's a really fine line to kind of traverse, because I don't want it to feel too linear and scripted, and at the same time there's no substitute for a moment that you really design and that can be really effective. Yeah. And but at the also a lot of, there's not a lot of jump scares per se in the game, but more like situations that are really scary, or more of a slow burning ones, or even situations where you walk into a situation where you know something in front of me is there's something's going on, and but still you need to go there because you need to advance, you need to find out something, so the player kind of has to get over themselves and advance still, even knowing that the situation they walk into, they don't necessarily would want to.
Can I just pick up on it? That was such a great discovery when you realise you can create these situations where you have a little doubt about, is this going to be effective enough? If they go backwards, they can break it. And it's like, no, you're forcing them to walk into their own fear.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's something you can only get in the interactive genre. So yeah, that was a good discovery. Huh?
Yeah.
When anyone is entering the horror genre, be it a filmmaker, a game developer, a writer, they have to kind of contend with the huge catalog of horror that already exists. We've been through the post-Scream era, we did the slasher period, and we've talked a lot about the folklore that plays into games and the kind of the perpetual fear that people have to play into. How do you keep horror original? Michelle, I obviously don't want you to give any part of your game away because we know so little and we're looking forward to it. But can you give me a little sense of how you made sure your narrative was unique and original?
Well, for starters, it comes from a very specific place, which is like Swiss folklore. It's a very specific place that partially exists in the real world. So it's kind of hard to go generic from that, which really helps. So every architecture, every crooked barn is kind of based in reality, and the same kind of goes for the gameplay, which Mondown does a lot of things that you wouldn't necessarily see in a horror game when you just would think of the game, okay, let's design horror. You do a lot of other things as well. You can drive a hay loader, you will do a little day of farming, you you do like mundane things in between, which I think really kind of helps or even puts the player into sort of um, sense of security or sereneness, which is always kind of overshadowed by the mood. And a lot of situations and a lot of encounters, they kind of really evolved from just working on the game. So I wouldn't necessarily start from, okay, this is the premise of this encounter, but it's just walking through this world and, okay, there's there's a hidden room behind this wall, which when you look at the mirror, you see it breaking behind you. It's like this kind of stuff which I couldn't really make up on paper planning, but that kind of emerges from making the game. And I think most or some of the best moments in the game are just, they weren't planned, but they kind of emerged and I went with it. And so I hope they surprise people like they surprised me when I thought, okay, this is belongs here.
Lucas, can you speak to crafting original horror specifically as it pertains to making a sequel for a beloved game? How do you make Little Nightmares 2 as original as Little Nightmares 1?
So, I mean, we're of course keeping the same strengths from the first game, and we're trying to enrich it with more features. So, I mean, in Little Nightmares, I think the originality comes from the perception, like you're really experiencing the game, you know, from the eyes of the kids, and this world is not a good place for kids at all. It's dangerous. It's disturbing. It's very unsettling. And that's how we play. And then of course we introduce, like, you know, traditional nightmares from the kids, like when you go under the bed and you've got like kind of very big hands trying to look for you, and we try to extrapolate that into a kind of extreme situation. In the case of Little Nightmares 2, we really wanted to, to go beyond the first game, so we decided to expand with outdoor places. So now you have a forest, you have a city, and those are a bit more open, a bit less linear, which is a new challenge for the team. But it is, in terms of technology as well, it is a challenge. But we were very happy about what we have so far. And what makes Little Nightmares unique is just the monsters. Like you, when you have you generally have like one big monster per chapter, and there's no monster that looks like, you know, a previous one. They're really truly original. They're all designed to make the player feel in a certain way. Sometimes they can just be like, you know, very aggressive, like the hunter. He's just a bloodthirsty, taxidermist trying to kill everything that he sees in his forest, and just like, you know, he's gonna stuff you with foam, and then that's it. That's his thing. But you know, other foes, they have more complex agendas. Obviously, we haven't revealed everything for Little Nightmares 2 yet, but the originality of each monster is really what makes, I think, this game different.
Barney, how do you keep Little Hope fresh within the context of the Dark Pictures anthology? Because we already expect so much following the first game.
To say that, I mean, it's there is kind of a format to the anthology where there's 5 playable characters, and those characters kind of develop the narrative or develop in the narrative. But there's 8 different games in progress at the moment, either released or in progress, and the design for each one is so completely different. The mix of horror genres and subgenres that come together to kind of in the game development, in the game design, are so different every time. For example, you know, the Man of Medan was kind of a psychological kidnap horror, without too many spoilers. The next one, Little Hope, again, without any spoilers, there's indications of a historical reference, for example, indications of witchcraft, and indications of some form of creature. And so, you know, you can only imagine how those separate elements will piece together in this one. Of course, you know, I'm privy to the next couple, and they're in a very different surroundings again. So we kind of, I guess, it's supermassive. We're delivering the same horror experience, but we're just changing it up every time. We've innovated with the multiplayer. So we're, the backdrops, they're just changing all the time. The subject matter's changing all the time. And we follow suit with the music. We follow suit with the soundtrack. A historical reference lends itself to a historical soundtrack. A present-day reference would lend itself to a present-day soundtrack. We were even influenced by the swelling of the sea for Man of Medan. Everything was written in 3/4 by our composer Jason Graves. So we, for us, it's an amazing experience for ourselves, because we can change up what we do on every game as well to keep it fresh. So if we're keeping it fresh, then we think we're doing a good job for the players, really.
Barney, this is just a question for you, but I've been curious. With having Will Poulter as a huge part of Little Hope after his role in Midsommar and his role in Black Mirror Bandersnatch, is there an element of excitement or anything unusual about working with somebody who's already established as a face in the horror genre?
That's an interesting one. I mean, I can only really offer you a personal perspective on that. I kind of, I think in a way there are expectations on how he will perform, because he's been such a large such a large part of other narratives, of other stories. But I think that's down to the players playing the game, whether we either meet, surpass, or surprise those expectations in our game.
I will keep Will alive, I promise you, when the time comes.
Good luck with that. Good luck with that.
Thanks. One thought that I've had for a while is I can't speak to Little Hope, but at least in Man of Medan and in Little Nightmares, there are ways to imagine that the ending is hopeful, or that you can get a happy ending, or that you can win the game. Michelle, can you start us a little bit on whether or not you think it is important that a horror game be beatable?
You mean like you finish the game and get a good ending?
Do you need to have the possibility of a good ending? Either open to interpretation, or because there are multiple endings, like in the Dark Pictures anthology?
I don't think it's necessary. I think probably the same question as in a movie. But yeah, if you can, at the same time, yeah, if it's a game and you can only lose, and it's really noticeable to you that, okay, I get the bad ending and you can't get a good one, I don't know. It might leave something to be desired, but I don't think you can rule it out in general. Really, it might be possible in certain cases or very specific scenarios, I think. I don't know. We would have to see it to see if it works.
Lucas, what do you think?
Well, I think we just should let the creators decide what kind of ending they want to do. I mean, like Little Nightmares 1, the ending is I don't think, like, it's not happy, it's not sad. The DLC ending is very melancholic. And LN2, well, you will see, of course. But I don't think there is any recipe for making just like the best ending possible. I personally enjoy endings that are not so happy, because I think they are more memorable than the happy ones. But that's just like a mere opinion.
Barney, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, what's a happy ending in a horror, right? Is it coming out with physically roughly intact, or there's I think a kind of positive ending for a horror can be kind of finding a simple kind of resolution or some form of equilibrium again after such a crazy night journey, dusk till dawn kind of experience. I think for us, I think it's kind of important to have the range of endings. And yes, everybody can die and everybody can survive, including any other actors that might have been employed by us. It's so yeah. I think for us, I think it's important to have that range. Whether it feels successful or failure, that's kind of that's. I think with regards to the replayability, I think if people are going to investigate sides of their personality and make different choices, maybe let their evil streak kind of win over. Maybe everybody dying would be a successful end to that playthrough. Yeah, that's down to the player, I think.
In the history of Hollywood horror, we often hear about the trope of haunted sets. So something weird happens on the set of The Exorcist, something terrifying happens on the set of The Shining. Have you ever had a scary experience developing a horror game? Lucas, you want to start us? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I hope not, because I need everyone to be there to finish the project. So I hope everyone is safe, in the team. But I mean, yeah, there's of course like stories, and then like you've got like the studio gathering for parties and stuff like that. But no, hopefully nothing too serious.
Michelle? I know you create your games by yourself, so I imagine the solitude has got to be a little stressful sometimes.
Yeah, it's just making the game is kind of scary. Yeah, because it's sometimes you get anxious. How will it do? Will I make another game? And all these questions like, and if you invest this much time, you get really, really attached to the project in an almost unhealthy way, I guess. So that's scary. And also one time I played the game in a chapel which the game has a chapel which is a real chapel. It's a really, I don't know, it's from the 1500s or so, which I was playing there as a child. It was always fascinating, and so the chapel is also in the game. So I thought I'll play the chapel. I'll go into the chapel in the game, but take my notebook to the chapel and play there. And I mean, it wasn't haunted, but it didn't really feel great because it's still, I'm not a practicing Catholic, but my upbringing, it still kind of felt wrong because the church is kind of a sacred place. So that was a bit of a moment of blasphemy, maybe.
Barney, any scary stories to share?
No, not massively. I mean, I think I sort of speak for everyone here. I'm sure, like you get gradually more and more desensitized to horror. It's not cynicism, but you gradually desensitized. But no, I mean, we become kind of acutely aware whether a kind of bug count or an email inbox, unread emails might read 666, or maybe you're working late one night and the life-size statue of the Psycho from Until Dawn out the corner of your eye might just catch you unawares, you know, in the corner of the office. So we have our moments, but overall fairly calm.
To that end, when you play horror games, be it your own or someone else's, what is a moment that stands out to you, something that really scared you in a horror game, a scene that really got you? Lucas, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to Little Nightmares 2, we've got like one chapter which is really horror oriented, and it's I mean, you know, I think horror fans will really love it, and it's still like freaking me when I'm playing it, and I know what's gonna happen, and I really enjoy having people at the office playing it, and they're like really scared to shit. It's really fun. So yeah, I can even sometimes be scared myself by our own game, which is, I think, a very good sign that, you know, this is going to be memorable for people who will play for the first time.
How about you, Barney?
In terms of our own games, there's often scares that they might get you the first, second time, and that's quite normal. But if there's a scare that gets you the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth time, you're still playing them. You're like, okay, we've really nailed that one. That one's working, you know. I think I have to call out a VR title we did, Rush of Blood. There were a number of moments in there. Oversized, screeching pig heads. That was a classic. That kind of got me on edge every time. It was the intensity. And also there was another part of the roller coaster ride. You go this long dip, and as you came back up the other side, there was an oversized child's doll who just had this gentle, high-pitched giggle. And I think it was just the juxtaposition, I think, of that the classic kind of horror moment. But that always sent a little shiver down my spine. I think it was after having kids that got me more.
Sounds overwhelming. Michelle, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, it can happen. Sometimes the enemies, if you're going into a house and do something and then you turn around and one of them is there, it can happen. Or one of them is passing in front of the window casually. But yeah, it's mostly, I think some of the best moments are really like the ones that work after many times, and not even necessarily jump scares or anything, but just moments or dark moments that are really hitting you in the gut, just because of the atmosphere, because of the sound design or the music. Just everything comes together nicely, and every time you play it, it's just really nice. You just to experience this moment again, and that's a great feeling then.
All of you have such original stories that you're telling, but a huge part of the horror genre is sequels and remakes and reboots and revisiting classic horror concepts. If there was one existing horror property that you could play with in the game space, what would it be and why? Anybody can feel free to start.
I don't know. It could be. I mean, I don't have like one specific in mind, but I'd probably love to play like a David Lynch movie as a point-and-click game or something like that. I think that could be really awesome. Like something very disturbing, something very weird. Yeah, it's maybe because that's kind of, you know, the kind of weird stuff that we do. I mean, of course it's different, but we tend to do just like stuff that are kind of unexpected, and I think his movies are doing that, you know, in an amazing way. So yeah, I'll probably pick up, yeah, something from Lynch.
Michelle?
Yeah, like a game of Eraserhead.
Yeah,
Or
for example.
I just thought Nosferatu would actually be amazing. Like, do it in black and white, and maybe even silent almost, and just make a really solemn, lonely game where you're the count. It could be really interesting. There could be sailing. I don't know.
I'd
I mean,
play it.
the mood of that movie is just. It's, I mean, the whole mood of silent movies. I don't know if it's been done in games or if it's too gimmicky, but I think just the whole aesthetic of it could lend itself really well to a horror game. But then do something really original with it, and don't follow the template of the film too closely, but just take it as a springboard for something original, maybe.
Barney?
I'd probably go the other way and want to take something otherwise fairly cute and innocent and twist it. I don't know, something like a Little Big Planet or something that my kids play, just to make a little twist on that, I think.
Well, that sounds pretty spectacular. With the time that we have left, I would love to hear a little bit more about each of your games coming up. Barney, you're first because it's this Halloween. We're going to be getting Little Hope October 30th. Tell us what you can. Tease us as best you can. We're all very excited.
It's been great to put we're literally kind of finishing, as we speak, with regards to schedule, etc. I've got to be really careful about spoilers. We're so close to it now, and I know I think we've got our marketing PR guys on this call as well. So no, I mean, it's been great putting it together as ever. It's super high quality, branching narrative game with multiple twists, multiple layers. Pacing's great. We're all playing it through at the moment. We're looking for polish areas. We're not finding that many. We're feeling good about it. Yeah, it's in a really good place, and looking forward to this one coming out. Looking forward to the feedback. We're feeling really good about this one. I can't really say too much. I know I'll drop myself in it. My apologies.
No, totally fair.
Okay.
We don't have to wait that long, which is great. For Little Nightmares 2, correct me if I'm wrong, Lucas, but I think we're looking at February 11th of 2021.
Yeah, that is correct.
How are you feeling? What can you tell us?
Well, I mean, we're still working very hard on the game, obviously, but I mean, Little Nightmares 2 is really expanding the world of Little Nightmares, and the recipe. We have Six, the character from the first game, coming back as an AI companion. So it's going to be a very emotional journey with our new hero. That the name is Mono. He's got a little guy with the paper bag. And of course, it's going to be we're going to keep the same strength, the atmosphere, the cuteness versus the horror. We are adding new features such as the ability to wield a weapon and fight like middle-sized enemies that you will meet in the game. But you will still have these amazing monsters that make Little Nightmares very, very unique, and you will have to find the best way, of course, to outsmart them. We were having outdoor places. The game is much bigger than Little Nightmares 1, which was a bit short. So overall, we are all very excited about the game. We think it's amazing. Of course, we still have some work to do. But yeah, no, we think we're in a good place. So the game will release February 11th on PlayStation 4, Xbox One, PC Digital, and Switch. And we have also announced a PS5 and Xbox Series X version for later in 2021.
Michelle, I know Mundan has been an incredible labor of love for you that you've been doing over years and years and years. How are you feeling? I know you're looking at a spring 2021 release.
Yeah. I don't know, it feels really unreal after all this time. It's really, really excited about. It's really coming together now. It's like a really special kind of phase or moment when all the music comes in. The voice acting will come in soon. It's spoken in Romansh, which is a very obscure language, which is only spoken in the Alpine region of Switzerland. And I mean, I hand through every texture of the game, and it's been a journey, which is when I started, I didn't really foresee the scope of it, I think. And now that it really comes together in a great way, it feels amazing and also pretty emotional. And I can't wait to see how people will react to the finished thing and finally show it to people. Yeah.
Well, I am personally looking forward more than you could know to being terrified by all of the stories that you were telling. I cannot wait to dive into each. Thank you, Lucas, Barney, Michelle, all for joining us. This has been an incredible chat. I hope everyone who's watching has a great rest of their PAX East Online and has a great time preparing for this year's Halloween, for Little Hope coming out, for Little Nightmares 2 coming out, and for Mundan coming out. Thank you guys for joining us.